Hey guys, how you going? This is BillyEatWorld again, and today we're just going to get into a bunch of simple tricks that you might have missed for Battlefield 5. Alright, so to kick off, you've probably noticed by now that some guns in BF5 load with box magazines, but others load much more slowly, either one round at a time or with 5-round stripper clips. Well, here's a quick tip. In an emergency, if you do need to fire your gun as soon as possible, just spam that trigger after you see the clip go in, and even if there's still more to go, it'll actually cancel the reload and you'll be able to fire again. Also, another way to cancel your reload is called the quick switch, which is basically when you double tap the switch weapon button, which technically counts as a weapon switch but doesn't play the animation. But with that being said, this still does take a fraction of a second, so I'd recommend if you're on PC to bind this button to one of your secondary mouse buttons so that you can access it really quickly if need be. Now, another cool thing that you might not realize you can do in Battlefield 5 is use the PAT as a mortar out to really long ranges by using the minimap, because as you can see, it shows a little red mark where your shot is going to land. So if you tag a target first and then line the dot up with the tag marker, then you should be able to drop the round right on your enemy's head. One of the reasons you have to do it like this is because the round of the PAT travels so slowly, and just like every other projectile in BF5, it's affected by the constant pull of gravity over time. And so here's a tip. As a general rule, just remember, especially when you're using the launchers, that the lower the muzzle velocity of your weapon, the more your shot is going to drop, and the more you're going to need to aim up to compensate for it. Now, also, speaking of bullet drop, well, if you've ever tried to do any long-range sniping, well, you'll know it can be pretty difficult sometimes to compensate for it, especially if you're a beginner. But believe it or not, it's actually pretty easy if you run a rifle with the zeroing specialization. You just have to tag the target or use the spotting scope to find the range first, and then set the zeroing as close as you can to that, which will compensate for most of the drop for you. Also, here's another tip. You've probably figured out by now that the Recon class's weapons create scope glint when you're using anything above a 3x scope. But here's something that you might not have figured out yet that I know confused me, is that even though it's exactly the same scope, the 3x doesn't create glint on the other classes. So, in other words, don't be afraid to stay scoped in if you're playing, for example, with the Assault SLRs. Alright, so the next tip I've got for you guys is check out the compass on your minimap and make sure you're using it when you're talking to teammates to give them directions. And also another good tip is to bind your big map key to something you can access easily, because if you bring it up, it'll make it much easier to see your map and your compass to give your teammates more accurate info on where your enemies are located. Also, speaking of locating players, well, if you find yourself in a hostile area surrounded by enemy troops, well, you might actually be able to hide from enemies by finding a corner and diving back or to the side with your sidearm out. And as you can see, if you stay really still, you actually kind of look like you're dead. And although it's not going to fool anyone who looks closely, it might actually save your life every now and then. Now, the next tip I've got for you guys isn't about sniping, but it's kind of related. Something you might not realize is that the M30 drilling shotgun actually has a third bullet round in addition to its 2 shotgun shells. And so if your accuracy is on point and you do want to do some super annoying shotgun sniping, well, all you've got to do is switch over the fire mode and you'll see it'll switch to that round instead. Also, another cool thing that you might not realize you can do in Battlefield 5 is throw back grenades now. Not once, not twice, but a bunch of times until the fuse eventually does burn out. But needless to say, as cool as it is, you don't want to try playing hot potato with impact grenades and Molotovs, because unfortunately, that's just not going to work out too well for you. Alright, so another new mechanic that you might have noticed is that bullets penetrate walls now, but what you might not realize is that how deep and how much damage they do after passing through depends on the caliber of the weapon. So in a nutshell, here's a tip. You probably want to avoid trying to shoot through walls with SMGs, but if you bipod it up with an MMG, then by all means spray down buildings and see if you get any hit markers. Also, another thing you might not realize is in the game now is shot deflection off vehicle armor, which applies to all weapons, including AT weapons and the tank guns themselves. But as you'll see in this clip, it doesn't seem like turrets bounce rounds for some reason. So in other words, you'll want to try and shoot at them first, but if you can't, most importantly, shoot at flat surfaces at a 90-degree angle to ensure maximum possible damage. Now, still on the topic of vehicles, well, another tip is if you find yourself in the top gunner seat of a tank, you can actually duck down now to protect yourself. And not just that, but as you can see, you can still shoot when you've got your head down, which might not be something that's that effective, but you can try it in an emergency if you're surrounded by enemy infantry. And last but not least, this isn't really a practical tip, but if you want to try out something that looks pretty awesome, seat switching in aircraft is actually really easy to do now. All you need to do is get them to fly over as low as possible and get them to bail out when they pass over, while you at the same time hit jump and the enter vehicle buttons, and as you can see, you'll end up in the pilot seat. But anyway, guys, I guess that just about wraps up this quick tips and tricks video, so let me know what you think in the comment section below. And also, if you've got a tip that you think I've missed, make sure you leave it down below as well so that everyone else can see, and also I might actually use it in another tips compilation later on down the track. As always though, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and please feel free to check out the links in the description if you want to see any more of these videos. And also don't forget you can find my Twitter and Discord links down there as well if you want to keep in touch. And as always, until next time, see you later and have a good one.